You want to see the fax machine working?
You've got a fax machine in the bike. What?
Of course.
That's amazing. That's sick. Wait, what? Wait, that's sick. That's insane. I love that.